Quiet women think deeply before they act, and that makes their actions count. In a world that rewards quick reactions and louder voices, we often overlook the extraordinary power of reflection. But quiet women don't rush. They observe, absorb, and analyze before they step forward. This deliberate approach gives them an edge that most people fail to recognize. While others speak without clarity, they're watching, learning, and forming a strategy. They're not afraid of silence, because in that silence they gather insight. And with that insight they make moves that aren't just reactions. They're calculated responses designed for impact. When a quiet woman walks into a room, she's already processing everything. The tone of the conversation, the unspoken dynamics, the energy. She doesn't need to dominate the space to understand it. She takes her time. She listens. And it's that listening that gives her more power than most people realize. Because while others are trying to be heard, she's learning what actually matters. She doesn't act on impulse, she acts on understanding. That's why her decisions often surprise people. They don't see them coming, but they make sense. They're not driven by ego, they're driven by purpose. In relationships, in business, in leadership, this trait is rare. It's not about being passive, it's about being intentional. It's about knowing that not every situation needs a loud reaction. Not every conflict needs confrontation. Sometimes the wisest move is no move at all until the right one becomes clear. Quiet women understand this. They use time as an ally, not a pressure. They don't rush to prove themselves because they're already rooted in their sense of worth. That confidence doesn't shout, but it resonates. When they speak, people listen. Not because their voice is louder, but because their words carry weight. Their insights are formed through internal conversations long before they're shared. That depth is what gives their actions force. It's not scattered energy, it's focused. And in a noisy world, focus is a superpower. We live in a culture that confuses movement with progress. But quiet women move with intention. They're not chasing approval or applause. They're aligning their steps with their values, their vision, their truth. That alignment gives them peace, and that peace gives them strength. People often mistake their quietness for insecurity, but that's a misunderstanding. True quietness doesn't come from fear. It comes from discipline. It comes from knowing that energy is sacred, that words should be used wisely, that not everything deserves a response. Quiet women are not overwhelmed by the chaos around them because they're anchored internally. That anchoring allows them to remain steady when others spiral. It's not indifference, it's clarity. And clarity is rare, because they're not constantly reacting. They see what others miss. They notice the patterns, the shifts, the opportunities that lie beneath the surface. And when they decide to move, they move with purpose. That's why their actions count. That's why people remember them. They don't need to raise their voice to raise the standard. They do it with their presence, with their discipline, with their consistency. That consistency builds trust, trust in themselves, and trust from others. They're not trying to prove they're right. They're trying to do what's right. That distinction makes all the difference. Their goals aren't driven by competition. They're driven by conviction. And conviction doesn't need validation to stay strong. It simply needs alignment with truth. Quiet women have the courage to sit in silence, to confront their thoughts, to refine their ideas before bringing them into the world. That inner work makes their outer actions more meaningful. They're not moved by trends. They're guided by timeless values. And those values show up in the way they lead, the way they serve, the way they love. They may not always be the first to speak, but when they do, they shift the atmosphere. Not because they've said something dramatic, but because what they say is rooted in wisdom. And wisdom doesn't demand attention. It earns it. It's earned through patience, reflection, humility, and depth. Quiet women cultivate that depth in silence. And from that silence, they birth clarity, conviction, and direction that influences everything they touch. Their calm presence commands respect without demanding it. There's something powerful about someone who doesn't need to assert themselves to be taken seriously. Quiet women have mastered the art of presence. They walk into a room and don't have to say a word for people to feel their energy. It's not loud, it's not boastful, it's composed. That composure tells people something before any words are spoken. This is a woman who knows who she is. She doesn't seek validation. She doesn't need the spotlight to feel worthy. She carries herself with a quiet authority that doesn't beg for attention. It earns it. There's a difference between attention and respect. Attention can be bought, shouted for, or manipulated. But respect is different. Respect is earned through consistency, authenticity, and integrity. Quiet women understand this deeply. They don't try to be liked by everyone. They focus on being true to themselves, and that truth creates an inner stillness that radiates outward. People sense it. They can feel the strength behind her silence. It's not emptiness, it's discipline. It's a sign of someone who doesn't need to dominate others to lead. She leads by example, not by control. In a world that often equates power with noise, the quiet woman disrupts that narrative. She doesn't raise her voice. She raises the standard. She doesn't over-explain herself. She lets her actions speak, and those actions, guided by intention, build credibility over time. Her calmness isn't weakness, it's self-regulation. It's the result of deep work. She has faced her fears, sat with her doubts, and chosen to grow in silence rather than scream for validation. That maturity creates a presence that's unshakable. It's not something you can fake. It's developed, earned, and carried with grace. In conflict, she doesn't react impulsively. She takes a breath. She chooses her words with care. And that restraint isn't cowardice, it's strength. The ability to remain calm when others are losing control is a mark of leadership. Quiet women lead with composure. They don't try to overpower. They inspire. They don't control others through fear. They influence through clarity and consistency. That's why people follow them, even when they don't demand to be followed. Because presence is not about being noticed. It's about being remembered for the right reasons. They have emotional intelligence that many overlook because they've spent time in self-reflection. They know how to respond rather than react. They understand the value of holding space for others and for themselves. That space allows clarity to emerge. It allows healing to take place. And in that healing, respect grows. People trust what's calm. They rely on what's stable. And quiet women are that steady ground when everything else feels chaotic. They don't chase control. They embody it. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally disciplined. Calmness doesn't mean the absence of feeling. It means the ability to feel without being consumed. Quiet women feel deeply. They care fiercely. But they've learned how to channel that passion with precision. That emotional clarity allows them to make sound decisions, to build meaningful relationships, and to set boundaries without apology. Their no is firm, not aggressive. Their yes is rooted in alignment, not pressure. That balance creates a sense of safety for others, and that safety is what commands real respect. They don't compete with noise, they contrast it. And in doing so they stand out, because while the world shouts, they listen. While the world rushes, they pause, and in that pause they find wisdom. They know that chaos cannot create clarity, so they become the calm in the storm. That calmness isn't just a personality trait, it's a cultivated skill. It comes from choosing peace over panic, truth over ego, and substance over style. And people notice that. They may not always verbalize it, but they feel it. It stays with them. People often gravitate toward those who make them feel safe, respected, and seen. Quiet women offer that without effort. It's not manipulation, it's presence. It's rooted in humility, not arrogance. And humility doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you don't need to constantly prove yourself. That internal security creates external strength. Others may raise their voices to be heard, but the quiet woman doesn't need to. She's already felt, already noticed, already respected, not because she asked for it, but because she became the kind of person who naturally draws it in. They build influence through trust, not volume. In a culture obsessed with charisma, flashy confidence, and constant communication, we often overlook the deeper, quieter foundation of real influence, trust. Quiet women understand this on an instinctive level. They don't force themselves into conversations or compete for the spotlight. Instead, they let their consistency, their actions, and their integrity speak for them. Their influence is not dependent on how many people hear them, but on how deeply they are understood and respected by the ones who do. People naturally trust those who do what they say, who show up when it matters, and who stay grounded even when things are falling apart. Quiet women often become anchors in the lives of others because they embody these qualities. They don't make promises they can't keep. They don't try to impress with loud declarations. They simply live their values, day after day, quietly earning credibility. And over time, this reliability transforms into trust. Trust doesn't need marketing. It needs authenticity. It needs someone to be real, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard. Quiet women don't fake strength. They live it. This kind of influence is more powerful than people realize. It may not grab attention in the short term, but it builds a reputation that lasts. When quiet women speak, people listen, not because they are the loudest, but because their words are backed by a track record of wisdom and stability. They've already proven that they won't speak unless it matters. So when they do, people take notice. That's the essence of influence built on trust. People know that what's being said comes from reflection, not impulse, from purpose, not ego. They aren't trying to impress everyone. They focus on impact, not popularity. They don't mold themselves to fit every situation. They remain grounded in who they are. And that stability is magnetic. Others feel safe in their presence because it's clear they're not pretending. There's no mask, no hidden agenda, no need to be someone else to gain approval. That level of authenticity makes people lower their defenses. It makes people want to listen, to follow, to respect. Influence built on trust doesn't manipulate, it inspires. Quiet women know that relationships are not transactions. They're connections. They're earned. So instead of networking loudly, they build relationships intentionally. They're not collecting contacts, they're cultivating bonds. And in those bonds, they create circles of trust that grow stronger with time. The people around them know they can rely on them. They know that when life gets hard, the quiet woman won't disappear. She'll be there steady, supportive, clear. That reliability is rare, and it's what makes her influence long-lasting. They don't push people to listen. They earn the right to be heard. And when you earn that right, your words echo far beyond the moment. Their influence isn't about dominating conversations. It's about shaping them over time. It's about the person who changes the direction of a group.
not by shouting over everyone, but by saying one thing that makes everyone stop and think. That's the power of quiet influence. It's subtle, but it shifts things permanently. People remember how you make them feel, and quiet women make people feel seen. They don't interrupt, they listen with depth, they ask meaningful questions, and in doing so they create space for others to open up. That's influence. Not taking control of the room, but transforming it by your presence, by being a mirror that helps others understand themselves. That kind of emotional intelligence builds trust faster than any performance ever could. People follow those they trust, and trust is always earned through character, not noise. Their influence isn't performative, it's rooted. It doesn't rely on constant visibility, it relies on silent credibility. They don't need to broadcast their value, they embody it. They're not chasing validation, because they've already validated themselves internally. That inner work shows, and the more grounded they are, the more others are drawn to them. Their voice may be quiet, but their influence is loud, because influence isn't about who speaks the most. It's about who listens best, who acts with integrity, and who others know they can count on when it matters most. They choose their battles wisely, and win them silently. Quiet women understand that not every confrontation is worth their energy. They have learned through experience that reaction is not always a sign of strength, and silence is not always surrender. Instead of being pulled into every disagreement or challenge, they assess the situation with clarity and discernment. They ask themselves if the issue at hand is worth the cost of their peace, their time, or their principles. And in doing so, they gain control, not over others, but over themselves. This self-control is one of the most overlooked forms of strength. While others rush into battles driven by ego or insecurity, quiet women take a step back. They analyze the motives behind the conflict, the potential outcomes, and the true significance of the situation. They don't allow pride to push them into unnecessary fights. Their sense of worth isn't tied to proving others wrong. It's rooted in something deeper, purpose, and purpose doesn't flinch when provoked. It chooses its path with intention, not impulse. There's wisdom in restraint. Not everything requires a response. Not every insult needs a rebuttal. Quiet women know that responding to every slight dilutes their power, so they save their energy for the battles that matter, battles that align with their values, that protect what's important, that move them forward. And when they do choose to engage, they don't do it with noise, they do it with strategy. They don't announce their moves, they make them, and that silence makes their victories all the more impactful. People often mistake their silence for submission, but that's a miscalculation. Silence can be strategy. It can be the calm before a decisive move. Quiet women don't need to declare war to win it. They don't shout their plans across the battlefield. They prepare in silence, act with precision, and let the results speak. That's why their actions often surprise people. There's no warning, no performance, just quiet, deliberate success. This approach doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding power. Real power doesn't need to be paraded around. It doesn't need to be loud. It simply needs to be present when the time is right. Quiet women understand that timing is everything. They don't rush to respond. They wait until they have the full picture, until their emotions are steady, until their next move is clear. That patience gives them an edge. They're not reacting, they're directing. And in that direction, they reclaim control of the narrative. When they do decide to confront something, they don't do it to tear others down. They do it to uphold truth. Their confrontations aren't fueled by chaos. They're guided by clarity. They don't seek drama. They seek resolution. And often they find that the strongest move is not to match the noise, but to rise above it. They walk away when it serves their peace, not because they're weak, but because they've already won by refusing to be pulled into something beneath them. Their victories aren't broadcasted. They're lived. Quiet women don't need external applause to validate their choices. They know what battles they've faced. They know what it took to overcome them. They carry those victories in their character, in the way they hold themselves, in the way they protect their peace. They don't need to explain themselves. Their growth is the explanation. Their discipline is the proof. And that proof becomes a quiet force that others can't ignore. In personal relationships, this wisdom protects them from being manipulated into constant conflict. They don't fall into traps of provocation. They don't escalate situations for the sake of ego. They set boundaries, enforce them without aggression, and walk away from chaos. That emotional discipline confuses those who thrive on drama, but it empowers those who seek peace and maturity. It's not that quiet women can't fight. They've simply mastered the art of choosing when to. Their silence isn't absence, it's presence under control. It's the strength to remain composed while others unravel. It's the ability to walk through storms without announcing their courage. It's the decision to rise without stomping. And when they do engage, they don't lose themselves in the battle. They stay aligned with who they are. That alignment ensures that their wins are not just external, but internal. They don't just come out victorious. They come out stronger, wiser, more centered. That's why their battles, though few, leave lasting impact. Because they weren't waged recklessly. They were chosen with precision, and won with quiet resolve. Quiet women don't chase attention. They attract it through authenticity. In a world addicted to performance and validation, quiet women refuse to play by those rules. They don't alter who they are to fit the moment, or manipulate their identity to draw eyes. They are not in a race to be seen. They are rooted in who they are, and that rootedness is magnetic. While others perform, posture, or present an edited version of themselves, the quiet woman remains whole and real. Her attention isn't on curating an image, it's on living a truth. And that truth, that raw and unfiltered presence, becomes a light people can't help but notice. There's something disarming about someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Quiet women don't seek applause before they've done something meaningful. They're not motivated by the crowd. Their validation comes from within. They understand that attention gained through performance is temporary, but attention earned through authenticity is lasting. They are not interested in being seen by everyone, only by those who truly see. This discernment filters out the noise, and it protects their energy. They're not swayed by trends. They're not desperate to be relevant. They remain consistent, and that consistency commands curiosity. People notice those who are different, not for the sake of standing out, but because they don't blend in just to belong. Quiet women don't dilute their essence for approval. They embrace their quiet nature, their thoughtful pace, their calm demeanor, not as flaws but as strengths. And in doing so, they challenge the world's assumptions about what influence looks like. They don't interrupt to be heard. They speak with purpose. They don't exaggerate to be remembered. They speak from experience. That authenticity doesn't just attract attention, it builds connection. And connection is far more valuable than attention. Authentic people are rare, and rarity is always compelling. Quiet women are attractive not just in appearance or presence, but in soul. They aren't loud, but they are clear. They aren't flashy, but they are felt. They don't try to control perception. They simply embody truth. That embodiment is powerful. It radiates a calm confidence that makes others want to lean in. In a sea of noise, their stillness is refreshing. In a time of pretense, their realness is revolutionary. It's not about branding, it's about being. They don't operate from a place of insecurity. They're not trying to be more likable, more visible, more celebrated. They understand the emptiness that comes from performing for love or attention. So they've chosen a different path, the path of self-respect, alignment, and quiet conviction. And from that path, their presence speaks louder than any performance could. They don't need to sell themselves. They've already accepted themselves. That inner acceptance reflects outward as presence. Presence that is rooted. Presence that doesn't flinch. Presence that makes others feel safe to be themselves too. They attract attention not because they demand it, but because they don't need it. And ironically, that's what draws people in. When someone isn't seeking to impress, you start to wonder what they know that you don't. What gives them that peace, that steadiness, that glow? And as people lean in, they discover something even more rare: depth. Quiet women are not shallow pools for quick validation. They are deep wells of wisdom, experience, and reflection. And anyone who truly listens to them begins to see the value of what can't be shouted, only felt. They're not passive, they're intentional. Every choice they make reflects their values. Every interaction is meaningful, not manufactured. They don't speak just to fill the space. They speak when it adds value. That discipline gives their words weight. Their silence isn't empty. It's full of observation, of presence, of grace. And that grace is unforgettable. People remember how quiet women make them feel. They remember the way they held a space, the way they honored the moment, the way they didn't need to shine in order to illuminate others. Authenticity is not an act, it's a return. A return to who you were before the world told you to be louder, more visible, more marketable. Quiet women have made that return. They've let go of performance and embraced presence. They've chosen real over impressive. And in doing so, they've become the kind of people whose energy lingers, whose silence speaks, whose authenticity creates space for others to find their own. They're not chasing a spotlight because they've realized they are already light. Their strength lies not in how much they say, but in what they stand for. In a world overwhelmed by constant talking, endless opinions, and performative noise, quiet women remind us that true influence is not measured by volume. It's measured by clarity. While others are busy speaking to fill silence, quiet women are anchored in principles that don't need to be shouted to be real. They stand for something: values, purpose, truth, and those foundations give their presence undeniable gravity. They don't chase every trend, don't conform to every narrative, and don't bend under the pressure of being liked by everyone. Their strength is quiet, but it's unshakable. When you stand for something, you don't need to keep explaining yourself. People can sense it. It's in your posture, your eyes, your silence. Quiet women don't have to argue for their worth, because their lives already demonstrate it. They know who they are, and more importantly, they know who they're not. That clarity gives them direction. It helps them navigate difficult decisions, toxic environments, and uncertain seasons without losing themselves. While the world constantly pushes women to be more palatable, more agreeable, more acceptable, the quiet woman remains rooted. She doesn't sacrifice her soul for a seat at the table. Their power comes from alignment. Their thoughts, words, and actions are integrated. They don't say one thing and do another. They don't flatter to manipulate.
They don't betray their boundaries for temporary acceptance. That level of integrity creates a strength that can't be copied. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's undeniable. It creates a sense of trust, not just with others, but within themselves. Because they've done the inner work to define what they believe in, and they live according to that definition. That's the kind of strength that's hard to shake. Quiet women don't live to impress. They live to express something deeper. A truth. A message. A commitment to living honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. They may not dominate rooms, but they influence the direction of conversations through the power of their convictions. They don't need to convince people. They allow their consistency to make the case. When others change shape depending on the crowd, quiet women remain the same. And in a world full of facades, that consistency becomes a mirror. It reflects integrity, and people take notice. They aren't afraid of standing alone, because they understand that standing for something often requires solitude. They don't abandon their beliefs just because others don't understand them. They know that not everyone will see their worth, and that's okay. Their identity isn't built on being liked, it's built on being aligned, and that alignment produces peace. The kind of peace that can't be bought, that can't be imitated, that doesn't get shaken by other people's chaos. They carry that peace with them, and it becomes a quiet force that influences everyone they encounter. Their strength is not reactive, it's intentional. They're not out to win arguments, they're out to live in truth. They're not trying to be louder than everyone else, they're trying to be truer to themselves. They speak when it matters, and when they do, people pay attention. Not because they're the center of attention, but because their words come from a place of deep knowing. Their voice carries weight, because it's not used carelessly. It's used with wisdom, with courage, with purpose. When life pushes them, they don't panic. They return to what they stand for. That internal compass guides them through uncertainty. It helps them make decisions others are too afraid to make. It helps them say no when pressure says yes. It helps them walk away from things that don't align with their purpose. And every time they do, their strength grows. Quiet women are not unopinionated. They are unwavering. And there's a difference. They aren't silent because they have nothing to say. They're silent because they're waiting for the right moment to say something that matters. Their impact is subtle but lasting. Long after conversations end, long after crowds move on, the quiet woman's strength remains in the memory of those who encountered her. People remember how she made them feel. Calm, grounded, challenged to think more deeply. They remember the way she didn't fold under pressure, the way she didn't need to shout to shift a room, the way she stood for something even when it was inconvenient. And that memory doesn't fade, because real strength doesn't announce itself. It shows up, does the work, and leaves behind something unshakable.